Okay, great.
Okay. So now how do I access? Can you guys let the people in from the waiting room since you're co-hosts?
I can.
That would be great. Hello and welcome. If you're entering the webinar, we're going to give it a couple of minutes because we had lots of people registered and we can see that not everyone has jumped in with us now. And oh, hey, Jean, so nice that we're getting greetings and having you join us from Puerto Rico. I remember my time there with you and my fellow Zonchans, so lovely to see you again. We're going to get going soon, everyone. Just giving people a couple more minutes to log in. If you are so inclined. So I understand the nature of this kind of event might want people to have anonymity and privacy. So if you are inclined to not be anonymous and you want to drop us a note about where you're joining us from in the chat, that would be lovely. You can also chat directly with host or co-host. So I'm the host. And tonight I have my team members, Carlene and Joshua, on with us to help out in case any of you guys need assistance. And they'll be monitoring the chat while I'm doing the presentation portion and trying to keep things running smoothly this evening. So while we're giving folks a minute or two more to log in, make sure that you have a notepad and pen or pencil handy, because I am going to be sharing lots of information in our time together tonight. There was so much more that I could cover, but we're going to try to give you really good value in the 1 hour that we're here together. And never fear that if you don't get something jotted down, we'll be sending you the recording so you can replay and go back and review and listen again if there's something you want to hear again or something that you missed and didn't get a chance to write down.
How can I PowerPoint?
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started because I want to respect everybody's time. And I know that it's a lot to take time out of your evening to join a program like this. So here we go. So officially, hello, I want to welcome everybody. As you may know, since you got some materials ahead of time about this program, my name is Debra Whitson. I'm the CEO and owner of Whitson Law Firm in Elizabethtown, New York. And I'm also the CEO and owner of a company in Keene, New York called Mediated Online Solutions. So my team and I are so appreciative that you're taking the time to join us for this webinar. Hang on, I'm having a little bit of a technical issue on my end. Okay. Okay, so look, I know that divorce can certainly be overwhelming, but by joining us here, you have taken an important step to take care of yourself and to take care that you avoid the most common pitfalls that I see as an attorney when I have my clients going through separation and divorce. And if you're here with us and you're going through separation or divorce or thinking about it, and you have kids, you will be learning ways to ensure that your children do not become collateral damage during your breakup. Ending a marriage is really hard, but getting divorced doesn't have to be. So, as I said a moment ago, listen carefully, grab a pen and notepad, and take some notes, because in the next hour or so, I will be outlining the mistakes that you're going to want to avoid, and I'll be arming you with information you need to chart your course through your divorce with the best possible chance for more smoothly and more quickly creating a better future for yourself and find happiness again. What I will not be doing tonight is giving you legal advice. And the fact that you've joined this webinar does not create an attorney-client relationship. Okay, so I'm a lawyer, there had to be a legal disclaimer, right? So there it is. This webinar is instead designed to arm you with the information that we suggest you consider. But we also strongly suggest that you have a lawyer to advise, guide, and support you through the legal process of divorcing. So since we are not your lawyer tonight, we would encourage you to seek one out. And if there is anything you need further assistance or information from at the end of this webinar, you are more than welcome to schedule a consultation with us. Please take particular note that when I do mention anything about divorce laws, that I am an attorney licensed to practice law only in the state of New York. So the laws to which I may make reference during this program tonight are New York state laws. So if you're in another state or another country, you're going to want to check about whether the laws where you are different than what you're hearing from me tonight. All right, now let's make sure that you're fully prepared and equipped to approach your divorce with confidence. So once again, if you're joining us a little bit after the start, I want to welcome everyone to the do's and don'ts of separation and divorce. We understand that considering separation or divorce isn't an easy option, but for some people, it's the best option. So if you don't know my background, I'm a family law attorney, mediator, and certified divorce specialist. My first job out of law school was working as a prosecutor on domestic violence and child sex abuse cases. And I guess I've always had a passion for helping women, children, or anyone who was underserved or felt they didn't have a voice and seek justice. So after leaving my career in public service, I sort of found my calling in family and matrimonial law. And although I love serving families and I love working with our clients, I'm often dismayed by the way courts treat these matters. And I've come to firmly believe that litigation should be a last resort for any family. In my 28 years of practicing law, I have concluded that going to court should be seen always as your last stop. And maybe you didn't know there were other steps you could take along the way to actually get divorced and never set foot in a court in some instances. So I'm giving this webinar to equip you with the tools you need at the start of and during your process of divorcing. But this slide says, if you have questions, you can feel free to leave them in the chat. And I'm just going to repeat that if you want to remain anonymous and you don't want a specific question tied to you, you can pose the question only to the host or a co-host. Or if it's a question that you're okay discussing above board and maybe you think other attendees would benefit from hearing the answer to, go ahead and put it in the open chat for everybody to see. But I'm going to leave that choice to you. And I do respect that sometimes people may want to maintain their privacy, or maybe they're considering divorce and haven't taken the step and they don't want to put that out in the world for anyone else to know. So at the end of the program tonight, I'm going to leave plenty of time to address your questions. And again, if you want to take something offline and arrange a consultation that's private and designed to specifically give you advice as opposed to generally answering a question, we welcome you to do so. Okay, so one of the most common things I get when clients come to see me for the very first time when they're considering or about to embark on a divorce is whether they should move out or can move out of the marital home. And there's frequently a misconception that moving out of the marital home constitutes abandonment. So abandonment is a legal term that is used in New York anyway for one thing and one thing only in the law, and that is as a fault-based ground for divorce. So it's important to understand that the ground for divorce, labeled abandonment, occurs when one party unjustifiably abandons the other spouse without that other spouse's consent, and that the abandonment continues for a consecutive period of at least 1 year. So leaving the marriage isn't always the same as leaving the home. And leaving one's home because the other spouse acts in a manner that makes it unsafe or inappropriate for the party to remain in the home, that would never constitute abandonment, because remember, abandonment is unjustifiably leaving the marriage. So this is really important, and I want to take a moment to emphasize here, I told you I was a domestic violence prosecutor, that safety trumps everything. And I would never want anyone to think that they must remain in a home that is unsafe for themselves or their children. So if your situation involves domestic violence, then I'm urging you to reach out to an attorney who can give you good advice, and to a domestic violence program for advice, guidance, support, and safety planning tailored to your unique situation. But while you don't necessarily have to be concerned about abandonment if you move out of the residence, there are some practical and tactical things that you should potentially consider. First, if you have children who live in the home, you've got to consider the impact on them. Having parents separate may actually benefit the children if it in the end reduces stress and tension and arguing, for instance. But moving out without a plan of custody and parenting time in place could result in chaos and a tug of war over who the children live with or who spends time with the children on a particular day. And that certainly isn't in the children's best interest. So there's some other things to consider. And like with so much of what I'm going to cover tonight, I'm giving you a really 30,000 foot high level view of things to think about and explore, but I can't go deep into the woods with you or into the weeds with you on all of these issues, or we would be here for many days. And I'm sure that you have other things to get to tonight. So I'm going to cover just quickly a few of the other things that are useful to consider. And I have seen clients not consider these things, and it has caused some stress and strife for them. So one is you've got to consider the budgeting. So there's another financial burden for taking on the expense of a separate residence when before you moved out, there was one pool of money in your household that supported only one household. And now that money has to be spread across two. So you want to be sure that financially you can make it, or you can find a way to tighten your belt to make two households work from the same one source of income, or one household source or pot of income. Things to consider that often cause problem and lands people in court are what personal effects or furnishings can you take or should you take when you move out? Cleaning out the house when you move out is likely going to prompt your spouse to go file an emergency application with a divorce court. And then one other thing to consider, and it's really more of a psychological thing, if you ultimately wish to end up owning the home at the outcome of the divorce case or divorce settlement, then moving out may create a precedent or leave an emotional impression on the other spouse that you don't want the home, or that they now, after spending some time in the home while you've been out and living elsewhere, that they feel more entitled to retain the home. So there can be a psychological disadvantage of moving out if you want to end up getting back in and owning the home at the end of the process. Okay. I know this is a do's and don'ts program, and I guess this is kind of a do, but I would say this to anybody. You've got to take care of yourself. Divorce is one of life's most stressful events. It can really put a strain on your physical health, your mental health, and it can lead to problems like stress, anxiety, depression, self-medicating with alcohol or medications and things like that. So thankfully, there are ways to overcome the divorce-related stress and mental health issues, and in the end, get through this and go on to live a happy and fulfilled life. So I highly recommend that everyone going through divorce find a counselor or therapist to guide and support them before, if possible, the divorce, certainly during the divorce, and even after the divorce. Now, I'm not suggesting that anybody is mentally too weak to withstand this. I'm not suggesting anybody has, a mental illness. Everybody going through divorce is going to be stressed and have adjustment issues, and counseling really does help. So even if you know you want the divorce and you know it's what's best for you, there is inevitably still feelings of loss and grief, anger and resentment, and fear of the unknown, especially if you've been married a long time. So it's a great time to work with a counselor to evaluate what you want and what you don't want from new relationships as you transition to being single. I also firmly believe that hiring a divorce coach can be extremely helpful. A divorce coach isn't engaging in therapy or counseling with you. Instead, they act kind of as your guide or your cheerleader, or that level-headed voice of reason. Maybe, consider the person on your shoulder being the level-headed voice of reasoning. That's your divorce coach. Because the ride, the path, the journey to getting divorced is often a bumpy one. So your divorce coach will help you set realistic expectations. Your coach will help you prepare and plan for a smoother divorce process. And your coach will keep you focused on the things that you need to prioritize throughout the entire process, which sometimes, depending on your pathway to divorce, can be certainly months and sometimes years. Okay, we're going to move on to more specific stuff now. Oops. Social media. So social media is every divorce and family court attorney's best friend or worst enemy, depending on whether their client misused social media or the adverse party misused social media. So there's tons I could say here. Mostly what I'm going to say is pretty succinct, and it's kind of like, be wary and try to stay off social media, but I'm going to go through some more specific points. I get it. We all are on social media, and sometimes it's the way we keep in touch with family and friends. And I'm not saying I'm going to take away, your pacifier abruptly or anything like that, but there's some common sense things that I would like you to consider. So there's a lot of damage that can come from your social media. And there's a lot of information that can be mined that might help you from the other side if you're going through a contested family court or divorce proceeding. But I'm here to help you protect yourself. So sometimes the things that you put out on social media, even maybe long before you thought of divorcing, seemed quite innocuous. So, maybe that time you and your best friends had a little too much to drink at a certain celebration. It happens. We all do it, and it doesn't make you a bad person. But that's the kind of thing that if you have that on your, social media from 3 years ago, you think you've forgotten it, it's totally irrelevant, and that is not your lifestyle, it could still come up in court. So some of those things that were, somewhat innocent or innocuous can potentially be determined to be damaging or helpful to the adverse side if you're in a contested proceeding. So even if you unplug from social media, you have to remember that if you have an ongoing case, you really, in most jurisdictions, are prohibited from destroying electronic evidence. So you might not be able to clean up your social media if you're already in a court battle. If you're contemplating divorce, you might want to go back and remove some of those posts that from that bachelor party or whatever, and get that off your social media, because electronic footprints out on the internet are often knowable and discoverable and usable in court. Also keep in mind about privacy settings. While it's a nice idea and a good idea to restrict your privacy settings if you don't already have them pretty restricted, just understand that even having the most restricted privacy settings or unfriending or unconnecting with someone on social media or blocking them doesn't mean that there isn't someone out there that has a friend access to your social media account that could be filtering that information over to your spouse. And therefore, what you thought was private isn't really, in the end, private. Okay. So I want to take a moment to talk about the kids. I know that might not apply to everybody's situation, but it's so important that it's worth devoting at least one slide. And I think there's a few mentions of it throughout the presentation tonight. So protecting your kids while you're going through a divorce and setting yourself up to be effectively able to co-parent after a divorce is a complex topic, and more than we can really cover today. But I want to just put out a few do's, because this is a do's and don'ts presentation. So I'm going to encourage you that you do make an effort to co-parent peacefully. Intense conflict between parents has been shown time after time to increase the children's distress as the parents are separating and divorcing. So if you do struggle with your co-parent, to co-parent with your ex-spouse, then seek outside professional help. There are professionals who coach and counsel on effective co-parenting. Do avoid putting your kids in the middle of the controversy. Asking your kids to choose which parent they like best or where they want to live, or giving them messages to pass along to the other parent isn't appropriate. Do avoid discussing adult issues with or in earshot of your children. This includes things about the court proceedings, child support, and any struggles you're having with the other parent. And do remember that in most instances, having consistent, frequent, and regular contact with both parents is what is best for a child's emotional health and development. So I know it's hard that now that a child's going to be living in two homes, that each parent has to accept they're going to see that child or their children less than they did before when they were all in one house. But I'm going to encourage you and suggest that you try to put your desire to have the children 100% of the time aside, because a good parenting plan focuses on what is best for your children's needs and not simply what is best for you or what you would prefer. And lastly, do give your children permission to love both parents and remind them frequently and often that they are loved unconditionally by you and by the other parent. So doing so models for your children that adults don't have to love each other, and they don't even have to like each other to work together cooperatively to raise the children. So in a nutshell, your kids are sponges and they're watching you and they're soaking in all that they observe as they see their parents go through this difficult process. So Go out on the web, ask your friends. There's good co-parenting information and programs out there that will help you reduce the impact, the negative impact that divorce has on your kids. Okay, so I'm an attorney, and my profession, believe it or not, and there's a lot of jokes about it, is all governed by ethics. So I'm going to throw in a little ethics stuff. So we want, if you're going to see a lawyer, the lawyer's best client is the client who has always behaved above board, is fully disclosing to the attorney, and has a moral compass, so they know where they're going and what's out of bounds on the path to get to where they're going. So here's some things I'm going to be cautioning you about in the do not do category as you're going through your breakup. All right, so I'm going to just rapid fire a few of these things. The list could be much, much longer, but I'm going to pick, I think, what my top things that I find myself advising my clients include. So don't lose your cool and let your frustration or your hurt boil over into any inappropriate action, especially not hitting, shoving, throwing things, or destroying things. Don't barrage your ex with too many texts or email messages, and keep the tone of all communications, whether they're spoken, whether they're written, in civil and business-like lane. So if you wouldn't type it or text it to your coworker or your boss, then don't type it, text it, or say it to your ex while you're going through this process. Don't go out of your way to undermine your ex's friendships or try to alienate them from extended family. Don't damage or destroy any of your ex's stuff or any of the marital property, even if you think the item isn't valuable. I often see things like the keepsake things that the children may have made for a parent on Mother's Day or Father's Day are the things that get damaged and destroyed. So they have clear and important and invaluable sentimental value. So if you wouldn't want it done to you, if you wouldn't want an item with that sort of value to you to disappear or be damaged or destroyed, then don't do that to your ex. Don't let your emotions override your logic during your divorce. Don't focus on the past or who is to blame for the marriage not working out. You can't change the past, so dwelling there is just simply not productive, and you have more important things to focus on, like your new happy future down the road. Don't stray from your values, morals, or ethics during the divorce process, even if you think that there's some financial advantage or gain or tactical advantage or gain to doing so. I can tell you for real, for certain, there is no financial or tactical gain in the end if you gave up your values, morals, or ethics during the divorce process. And finally, this is when I say a lot to my clients: don't spend more money on obtaining an outcome that is worse than the cost of the fight. So you wouldn't spend $10,000 to fight to get a $1,000 bicycle in the divorce settlement, right? So keep your eye on return on your investment as you're going through this process. Otherwise, the process will become way more costly than perhaps your family can afford. Okay, this is the happier part. Things you can do rather than the things you should avoid. So just bear with me here. All right. And this is a much more upbeat slide for me to present too, because I feel like I was just, the nasty mama shaking her finger at you in the last slide. But this one, do spend time working on yourself instead of focusing too much on the other person and their faults. Do respect your ex's personal space as if the two were strangers. And this is particularly important if you're living in separate spaces. Respect that you're now living in separate spaces, but also respect them in every way as though you were strangers or acquaintances. Do identify one or two solid friends that can support you through this process. Do discuss with your attorney any surveillance that you think may be happening to you, or any surveillance you are considering doing of the other party. You want to know whether in your jurisdiction, if it's lawful or not lawful to secretly record or videotape your ex, for instance. So real quickly, in New York, we're a one consent state. So if one party to a two-party conversation is consenting that it be secretly recorded, it can be secretly recorded and used in court. But that doesn't mean you should do it. So you're going to want to get individualized advice on whether that is a good use of your time and energy in your particular situation. If you feel unsafe around your ex, or you feel threatened or harassed in the way that they communicate with you or behave with you, make sure you have a witness with you anytime you are communicating with or in the presence of your ex. Do think of divorce as a business transaction instead of an emotional one. And I'm not saying that there isn't a whole lot of emotions that go through ending a marriage, but the process of divorcing is really a process that's focused on disentangling you financially and practically from each other. So work the emotional things out with your therapist and spend your time in the divorce process focusing on breaking up with your financial or business partner who just happened to be your spouse. Now, I've said in the prior slide, don't over communicate or barrage your ex with communications, but it is helpful if you're going through a divorce, especially if you're going through one that is or might end up in court. Communicate as much as possible in a form that has a trail. So text messaging or email is really clear to establish what was communicated and what was not communicated. So some of those different views of reality that divorcing spouses may have about what was said in a particular instance can be neutralized if we have the digital communication trail and we know exactly what was sent back and forth. And remember that no matter what you think about your spouse who is the parent of your children, the children are entitled to love and respect that person. So your feelings should be your private feelings, and you should in every way possible demonstrate that you at least respect the children's other parent. Okay, I'm going to take a little segue here and talk about the options you have for how you get from married to divorce in a legal sense. So we kind of all know the classic, file a divorce action in court and let that wind its way through the court system sort of approach. I think that that's the approach most people think is their only choice. But I want to spend some time explaining and educating you that you really do have other options for how you get from married to divorced in a legal sense. So some divorcing couples are literally able to sit down together and figure out how they want to divide their assets and debts, what their custody and parenting plan will look like, who will pay or receive family support, and they'll reach a comprehensive agreement on basically everything that needs to be addressed to get them an uncontested divorce. So I refer to this kind of approach as the kitchen table approach. And couples lucky enough to be able to reach an agreement entirely on their own at the kitchen table are a relatively rare breed, but they are out there and good for them. And hopefully maybe you fall into that category too. But chances are communication struggles that have contributed to the end of the marriage and maybe further exacerbated by the fact that the parties are now openly saying they're going to go through a divorce, make it difficult, if not impossible, to sit down rationally and civilly at the kitchen table and talk through and settle and fairly negotiate for oneself all of the things that need to be addressed. And if that's the case, divorce mediation is also an excellent option, and it keeps you out of court, but it's a structured process that facilitates civil, respectful, and productive discussions with your ex as you're talking about things and deciding about the things that are necessary and important to decide as you're divorcing. So mediation is one of a number of alternative dispute resolution processes, and it allows couples to negotiate a mutually acceptable agreement and outcome with the help of a neutral mediator. Now, a mediator doesn't have the authority to make any decisions for the parties, but instead works as a neutral professional guide and attempts to facilitate agreement on any disputed financial or co-parenting issues. The mediator's role is to help the parties understand and identify their priorities and any other issues that are getting in the way of them reaching a final agreement. Help the parties clear up any misconceptions they may have about laws and rules governing the breakup and division of assets and how custody orders might work in court, and possibly brainstorm with the couple to help them consider ideas or options that they might not have considered on their own. It's important to understand that the mediator is not representing either party, even if that mediator, like me, is an attorney. The primary goal in mediation is to facilitate productive communication so that agreement can be struck. So there are a number of benefits of mediation. I'm a huge fan. I created a whole business around encouraging people to mediate any of their family law-related disputes. But some of the key ones are that it's confidential. So while all courtrooms in New York State are public, where your custody debate or fight or battle, or your divorce issues, your relationship issues, your couple's affairs and couple's finances are all out in the public forum, and strangers can be sitting in the courtroom listening to all of this. So mediation is completely confidential, and there's no public record of any of the communications or even of the parties' ultimate agreement. Mediation is far less costly than any other method other than the kitchen table approach, of course, which is free unless you hire an attorney to help you draft your agreement once you've reached an agreement at the kitchen table. Mediation is non-adversarial and therefore less stressful and less costly than battling it out in court. And if there are kids, it definitely keeps the kids out of the fray so the kids don't become collateral damage in parental warfare. So I want to take a moment before I go to the next topic I wanted to mention, and I forgot to on the last slide with respect to mediation. With respect to mediation and any of the other non-court-based processes for reaching or getting yourself divorced, I'm aware, because of personal experience in my professional practice, that some relationships have just such high conflict, or one party is very high conflict and the other party feels victimized. And those situations may cause people to think like there is just no hope that we could ever do a non-court-based process to effectively and fairly reach an outcome to get divorced. And I want to just encourage you to consider that there are mediators such as myself that have specialized training in effectively working through high conflict situations, or with high conflict couples or high conflict individuals. There might be one party who's high conflict and the other's not. That can be quite effective in helping the parties reach fair resolutions, protecting the less high conflict person from the negative impacts of the conflictual situation. And it can be a wonderful way to avoid court, because high conflict people also often intentionally use the court process to prolong, protract, embarrass, and raise the expense of the whole divorce saga for the other spouse. And that can be effectively neutralized if you can find a mediator who will work with high conflict individuals. Okay, so now I want to talk about collaborative divorce. And if you consider this pathway or these options to divorce on a spectrum, then the lowest cost, least outside involvement option is the kitchen table one. And then we're moving up the scale when we go to mediation, and then there's collaborative divorce. So collaborative divorce is a team approach to resolving amicably, peacefully, and outside of court everything that needs to go into a full marital divorce settlement agreement. In collaboration, both parties retain specially collaboratively trained attorneys, and typically will also hire a divorce coach who has mental health or divorce coaching background as part of their team. And they may bring in a financial professional who serves as a neutral professional source of guidance and advice. And sometimes even a child specialist if it's important to address special needs and concerns of the children, and to give the children a voice in the process of deciding custody and parenting. And that's typically seen when you have children who are a little older and whose voice can and should be heard. So collaboration, like mediation, saves time and money, and the possibility, the likelihood of reaching a full settlement for the parties outside of court is exceedingly high, because every one of the team members commits to keeping the parties out of court and working together to make it work. So you've got not just two parties who maybe are interested in trying to stay out of court, but you got a whole team who is like, we're going to do what we can to make this work, and everybody's going to, you know, pitch in and be creative and bring their expertise to bear on the situation. So the likelihood of successful negotiated outcomes is really, really high in collaborative divorce. So there are a number of differences, and I think I've highlighted those for you. There's more outside professional involvement in the process. Therefore, there's more cost, because those people generally are not working for free. But you do have the power of the team as opposed to the power of the single mediator. It's a great way to bring your children in a healthy way, into the process, not into the whole process, but to make the children feel heard. You know, it's more formal, a bit more costly, but still an excellent option for many, many families. Okay, and then the last stop on this road or pathways of getting divorced is the courthouse. So that's often referred to as a litigated divorce. So of all of these options, litigation is by far and away the most costly. It's the most time consuming, it's the slowest, and it's the most emotionally draining option there is. And you might be thinking, why is this attorney trying to talk me out of the one that's gonna, you know, earn her more money? I'm really sincere when I say to you that these kinds of battles in court should be avoided at all costs. And it does me no pleasure. It brings me no pleasure, and it brings me no satisfaction when I have a client who has a big bill because they had a long divorce, even if it's a successful outcome in the end under the circumstances. So when we hear about litigation, we often think about trial. And in a trial, a judge will make decisions for you. I personally think it's the hallmark of irrationality to let a stranger in a black robe make any important decision about your life, your finances, and certainly about your children. So I understand that in most jurisdictions, as it is in New York, that the non-court-based options for getting a divorce are purely voluntary. Now, I know there are some states that have a mandatory referral to mediation, or in some circumstances arbitration for matrimonial cases, divorce cases. The parties have to give it a try mandatorily, but they can't be forced to stay through the end of that process. So kudos to those states. New York is not one of them. So all of the other pathways to divorce are voluntary, and they require both parties to sign on, and, you know, in theory, sign on to the use of that process. Sometimes spouses think that the non-court based processes are not likely to get them as much as they would win if they went to court and got what they were entitled to under the law. And I'm here to tell you that no one in divorce wins unless the other party doesn't show up, and then they're in default. So, I mean, I guess that sometimes happens, but no one wins. Both people lose. And in the end, you've spent a lot of ton of money, and you've got a ton of acrimony and bitterness that has been fueled and fed during the process. And my experience is when the judge is left the obligation and responsibility to make a decision for the parties, when the parties can't decide for themselves how they want to resolve this, that both parties walk out of the courthouse very, very dissatisfied. Okay, a couple special considerations, and in the age of cryptocurrency and digital banking and day trading and all sorts of things, there's frequently questions that I get when clients come in and say, how will I know if my spouse has hidden things or siphoned off finances, and that they have a bank account in another country I don't know about? or they have been investing in cryptocurrency, and I don't know the first thing about any of that, right? Like, so they're like, I've just been out of the loop in the financial side of our marriage, and I don't feel comfortable that I have all of the information that I need. So I'm going to spend a couple minutes on this. So rest assured that if you're going through a court process, there's a legal requirement that each spouse must disclose and swear in a document that they have disclosed all their assets, income, and debts as part of the court litigation process. And this is critical because for anyone to understand if a settlement, particularly a financial settlement, is fair, you have to have enough information to gauge what's fair and what's not fair. So I would just mention here that if you're going to consider collaborative divorce, there is formal and mandatory financial disclosure as part of the collaborative model. So, the refusal of one party to be completely open and above board and open book about that could be disqualify that party from continuing in the collaborative process. And most mediators would at least explore with the mediation clients whether or not they both have access to important bank account information and investment information, retirement savings information, credit card balance information, mortgage loan balance information. And in some circumstances would require the parties to certify that they have shared that information with each other. Even some mediators, and in some circumstances, I have done this, I've asked the parties to disclose it between everybody, me and them. It doesn't go further than me and my office, but that there's paperwork to back up the assets and debts that the parties are negotiating about. So there are times when someone will inadvertently or even deliberately be less than completely forthcoming. So, in a formal court process, the party is swearing that their affidavit of their financial status is true. So there could be perjury or other outcomes or penalties if it's proven that they have failed to disclose something. But, I often see clients say something just isn't adding up. All of a sudden my spouse is living a lifestyle that I don't think that our income really justifies or supports. So you should know that if you consult with a lawyer, there are companies that whose whole mission and being is to seek out the hidden financial assets of someone who's suspected to have hidden them. And then there are forensic accountants, and forensics just a fancy word that says for the purpose of court. So there are accountants who work in forensics, and specifically forensics in matrimonial divorce cases, who can take a detailed look at the records and the digital trails and uncover things that may have been hidden or attempted to be hidden by one or both of the spouses sometimes. So those are out there, and if there is a lot at stake, then it may be worth engaging a professional like that to assist you so that you are very, very certain that you've uncovered everything that you might have a right or entitlement to a part of. So there are some pitfalls, of course, everywhere, every step along the way in the divorce. There are things that could go awry and inure to a party's disadvantage. So here are some of my top pitfalls. One is relying on the advice from your well-meaning friends and family. Look, I know they have good intentions and I know they want what's best for you, but unfortunately their advice could be misguided. So often I see clients come in and they're absolutely certain that an outcome is definitely attainable because their friends told them so, or there's a legend of someone else that a friend of a friend of a friend knew who had this particularly amazingly off the charts good outcome on a particular issue. So sadly, those stories seem to be, like local legend most of the time, and they may have no application to the particular behind the scenes circumstances of this particular marriage. So while your friends mean well, and they may urge you to go fight for everything and take the other person, for all that you can get and go for the juggler, sometimes if there's not enough assets worth investing in that kind of fight, and putting your kids through that kind of acrimony for, then you've just made the lawyers rich. And in the end, you haven't really gained. So be wary of the well-meaning advice of the friends who really love you and want the best for you, but make sure you get advice from somebody who has understood your situation through a full consultation and can give you experienced advice. Another pitfall is not keeping or providing your attorney with full and complete records. So if you're at the stage that you're considering divorce, or you're setting yourself up to plan for the divorce, gather those records, organize them. If you don't have physical possession of them, get copies electronically from your bank, your credit card company, your mortgage company, etc. The records are really one of the most important tools that you will need to make an informed decision, and that any professional you're working with will need to be able to best guide and advise you. Another pitfall, this is a big one, is not coming to grips with the new financial reality. So I went into law because, math is not something that I love, but I'm going to tell you, it's simple math that if you have a household with one pot of money and you're going to split that up into two households, the same number of assets, the same number of debts, the same incomes, but now you have two households to support, the budgets are tight unless you are in the mega wealthy category. So no one really ever keeps the same standard of living that they did when they were married, when they're initially coming out on the other side of a divorce. Now, I want you to know that you will rebound if you're smart and you plan, and you will get back to a newer, better, and maybe more prosperous place. But you have to know your new budget. You have to know what you can afford. You have to know what you can reasonably expect to get in the marital settlement, or in terms of spousal or child support if you are a candidate for those. So not really sitting down with a calculator and a pencil or a spreadsheet or an advisor to get clear on this can quickly mean that the bills mount and the debt mounts. And too often I see financial disaster and even bankruptcies on the heels of a divorce, where parties weren't really thinking about the significant impact on their financial situation. Here's another big one: keeping a house that you really can't afford. So I get it. I know it's often a very emotional decision. So much is changing in your life as you're going through the process of separating and divorcing. And sometimes it just feels like the one constant is that you're in a comfortable and familiar place, where you want that for your children. But in some instances, it's just not financially wise to keep the house. So again, I would urge you to start by making a list of all your expenses and understanding the cost of keeping the house if you do obtain it as part of the divorce settlement. You have to consider that if you keep the house and there is equity value to the house, then you're having to pay your spouse a fair share of that equity value. So you may be taking out an additional mortgage loan to pay off or buy out your spouse, or you may be trading off other assets in exchange for getting the house. So it's important to consider things like, if you're keeping the house, let's throw some numbers out, that has $100,000 in equity value. So if your spouse would be entitled to $50,000 of that, you're going to let him keep a $50,000 savings account in exchange. Well, your spouse now has $50,000 of quick cash that he or she can access in an emergency or a health crisis and something like that. And if you've took all of the marital wealth that is coming to you in the form of a piece of real estate that you can't easily sell, and you may not be easily or quickly able to borrow on any equity, then you may be strapping yourself and making yourself vulnerable to not being able to financially survive an unexpected crisis, such as if you became ill or had an accident and were out of work for a long period of time. So be careful about, trading off everything else that you would get from the marriage just to keep the house. So those are some of the biggest ones. There are many, many more that we could talk about, but I know it's not fun to talk about taxes ever, but tax is another area where there can be potentially pitfalls or things that you haven't thought through. So I am not a tax attorney. I am not a CPA, and I don't even play one on webinars or on TV or anything like that. So I would just say to you that there are things like if you keep the house, there could be capital gains tax that you owe when you sell it. There could be taxable implications of paying or receiving alimony or spousal support. There could be taxable implications of getting a share of your spouse's IRA if you draw it before you're age eligible, or if you borrow against it and things like that. So just understand that you should get tax advice anytime you're going through a big financial change in your life, just so you don't get yourself in trouble. All right. And a final thing that I think that parties sometimes fail to consider is the potential loss of health insurance benefits if you're covered by your spouse, and that will go away at the judgment of divorce, except for COBRA rights, which are time limited and pretty expensive typically in the United States. You have to make a plan or a budget or try to negotiate in a way that you are able to cover. Maybe you need more alimony for a period of time to cover your health insurance, but you don't want to suddenly lose health insurance and find out after the fact that it's unaffordable for you. Okay, there's a bunch of questions that you can ask during divorce, but I want to leave time for your questions. So this was some things that I was going to suggest that you ask, but I think it's probably going to be more valuable to all of you if I just skip past this, and I think we should be coming up on questions to ask. Oh, I don't know. Does anybody want to weigh in on whether I give my thoughts on divorcing a narcissist? I don't want to hold everybody over, and I do want to make sure we get questions answered. I can stay as long as I need to, but I don't want to short sell anyone. So maybe you want to put in the chat what your thoughts are on that. And Carlene and Josh, I'm not seeing the chat at the moment. So let's see if I can get chat view up. So nobody is weighing in. Carlene, are there questions in the queue?
I don't see any questions at the moment.
Okay, so then I'll go through the rest of the formal presentation, and maybe people will got in after the fact, and I can certainly stay around and take some time. So on the narcissist topic, let me say that I'm not diagnosing anybody, and I am aware that the literally the narcissistic personality disorder under the DSM-5 or 6 or whatever version is in effect for psychiatric or psychological diagnoses is a relatively rare diagnosis, because there are a lot of criteria for individuals to meet. You have to check a lot of boxes to get that diagnosis. But I am also aware that there are traits, tendencies, and behaviors that are common for people who are ultimately diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder in certain people who maybe don't meet every diagnostic criteria. So suffice it to say that this is a very, very popular topic, and I think that there's been a lot written and discussed about it. But I do see that people with narcissistic tendencies in their behaviors are really, really difficult to be married to, and they're in many ways even harder to divorce. But in the end, breaking free from a narcissist is so much healthier if you are in a relationship with somebody who is leaning towards a narcissist personality. So know that, probably not telling you anything that you don't know if you're in that situation, that you have a difficult road ahead of you to get out of this marriage and this romantic relationship and entanglement. But if you have the right team in place, you'll get there and your life will get better. So when negotiating any kind of agreement, but particularly financial agreements with a narcissist, chances are that because narcissists are control freaks and like to use the finances of the relationship to control and sometimes abuse or harass the other spouse, then you've probably already relinquished control over the finances to a great extent just to avoid the exhausting battle with your narcissistic spouse over the financial situation. So you, in a way, have to steel yourself to get into strategic thinking and to brace yourself to approach this firmly and with great intention. So at all, costs, I'm sorry for the pun, but it's time to familiarize yourself or refamiliarize yourself with the marital financial situation. Go around the narcissist if necessary to get the access. You may have to have a lawyer or a asset finder or forensic type person help you get around, get at the financial information, and if the narcissist is roadblocking you at every turn. If you're going to hire a lawyer to help you get through this, make sure that you ask the lawyer about their experience and their success rate in getting the victimized spouse through a divorce with a narcissist on the other side. They're probably going to tell you that it's miserable, it's hard, and it's expensive. And I think that's just real good, honest advice. There's no easy way for you to get out of this. There's no easy way for your lawyer as your advocate and your voice through this process to get through it easily, but it certainly will be a lot smoother and a lot more surgical if you have a divorce lawyer who knows what's coming at you and the lawyer, if you've got a narcissist on the other side. This is a particularly important time to have a counselor in your corner throughout the whole process, and maybe take on that divorce coach as well that I talked to you about before, because you will for sure have times where you think you're losing your mind. I think you can't go one more day through this process and that you are never going to make it and see the light of day. So you have to have some good professionals in your corner for the emotional support and to remind you that your gaslighting narcissistic spouse, who may try to gaslight your attorney, their attorney, the judge, your children, etc., that you're not the crazy one, that you're being gaslit, and your narcissist is the one who is lying and manipulating and conflating the situation. If you haven't started the process and you know you're trying to get out from under a narcissistic marriage, then do some pre-divorce reconnaissance. So gather up everything you can, take copies or photographs of documents, assets, preserve all past and ongoing communications with them. Make sure you safeguard everything that you have privacy in with new passwords. If you've shared passwords or the narcissist demanded you have passwords, now's the time to lock down things and get your password reset. And start to really lock down and gear up for the long road ahead. And by all means, don't make any important or final decision if you are feeling at the stress breaking point of the divorce process when you're divorcing a narcissist. If you need to take a couple of days away to get some R&R or walk in the woods or something like that to clear your head and recoup and come back with the strength and the emotional energy to really focus on what is a good strategic and logical outcome, then do so. Don't feel rushed or pushed or threatened into making a final decision when you're divorcing a narcissist. And at the end of the day, I know that there's often a tendency to say, it's worth it to me to get out with my sanity, so I'm going to take less financially than I might have held out for if I wasn't trying to get out of hell. And I think that sometimes for many people in that situation, that's a logical trade-off. So sometimes you have to say that your sanity and your happiness and your your emotional well-being is worth taking a little less, and then set about when you get out of that to make a plan to rebound financially. But always, always, always make sure you're taking good care of yourself. You're going to need to stay strong and focused for longer than the average person going through a divorce. And if you have children who will keep you tied to the narcissist because you're having to co-parent with the narcissist, it's really important that you go research, write this down. Maybe Carlene or Joshian, write Bill Eddy, and maybe a link to his High Conflict website, High Conflict Institute website. But Bill Eddy, EDDY, is the leading authority on communicating with a high conflict person. And he has special books, materials, and trainings on how to co-parent with a high conflict co-parent. He is amazing, and you definitely want him or his resources and materials informing you of how to get through this and how to treat the narcissist with kid gloves in the way you communicate, so you don't send the communications into the tailspin that they usually would end up in when the narcissist is controlling the dialogue. Okay, I'm just going to take a quick moment to talk about the fact that Whitson Law Firm and Mediator Online Solutions are the only firms in the state of New York that are licensed to offer these really unique programs that were designed by and are the brainchild of an amazing family law attorney mediator in Canada. And these are a resource and service package that are low cost, low stress, low professional involvement, but at the same time provide you the support of a mediator and in my instance of an attorney as you're working through separating with young children, separating or divorcing when you are in the so-called gray divorce category, and you may have adult children spread out across multiple homes, and maybe there are grandchildren in the mix, which creates a different dynamic when you are divorcing, and you're still parenting your adult children, whether you think it or not. So it's important. There's important considerations about those extended family relationships when you're in a longer term marriage and you're in the gray divorce category. And then designing our future together is for when you happily are outside of this divorce and you're ready to move forward again in a new relationship and you're going to cohabit or get married. This is a program that's designed to help the couple work together, plan together, talk together, and communicate about all of the things that will strengthen that relationship and the cohabitation or the marriage going forward. So addressing everything from finances to future planning to blending families, if that's your situation, and more. So you get these resources, these guidebooks, materials to work on together on your own as a couple or as a breaking up couple, and the support of a mediator and helping you talk through these things and reach agreements about things so you can have the best possible peaceful outcomes, whether you're coming together and making a family or whether you're breaking up. I'm also really, really thrilled and kind of exhausted actually to announce that it has been a dream of mine to write a book that shares all of the things I have learned in my 28 years of working with couples and families in one book called Divorce Done Right, A Better Way to Break Up. It takes some of the ideas and thoughts and quick topics that I covered tonight and really fleshes them out in a much more complete and cohesive way. We wanted to give you a lot of information and a lot of value tonight, but I'm really proud about this. It took a lot personally to get it done while running two very busy businesses, but it'll be out on Amazon in the coming weeks, and I hope you will look for it there. But we are going to gift everyone who attended the webinar tonight an advanced copy. So it's not yet officially printed. You won't see the, publication barcode on it and the ISBN number on it yet, but because that's all in the works and coming any day now. But what you're getting is exactly the same content as what will be available for sale and purchase on Amazon very soon. I hope you enjoy it and find it useful. We look forward to hearing what you think. You are the first people outside of our businesses, our organizations, to have the opportunity to read it. And we really do value your feedback, and we hope that you will share that. And we'll be reaching out, just so you are aware, to see what your thoughts and reviews are about that, so that if we've done a good job, that would be great to know. If there are things that are not covered that could be covered in my next book, because we're already thinking about the next one, we'd like to know that as well. And then we will be, following up with you on options for you to review us online, and to also share this information with anybody you want under some special offers that will be coming your way, to your benefit and the benefit of anyone else that you think might benefit from that book. So let's see, what have we got next? So okay, so there is a question in the chat. So the question is, what happens to an inheritance that one spouse received before they entered the marriage? That's a really good question. So in New York State anyway, marital property is defined as any asset or debt acquired from the date of the marriage until the date the parties reach a signed marital agreement, or the date the parties file for divorce, whichever is soonest. So if you own something prior to the marriage, like an inheritance, then it's by definition not marital. And we would say in New York, it's the separate property of the spouse who received that inheritance. But one thing you should be wary of, or be aware of, is that if you enter the marriage with separate property, but you commingle it with marital assets in some fashion, like you use part of that inherited money to buy a house, and you and your spouse take a mortgage for part of the purchase price, but your inheritance pays part of the purchase price, and you title it in both spouses' names, now you've made that part of your inheritance a marital asset potentially. So if you keep it strictly separate and you owned it before the marriage, you don't commingle it or jointly title it, it is the separate property of the titled spouse who inherited the property or money, and is not subject to being divided by a divorce judge in New York. Thanks for your comment, Jean. Appreciate that. Okay, if there are other questions, I can hang around a moment. If not, I just want to let you know that you've got these slides that have a little bit more about me and a message about our mission and philosophy and our values at Whitson Law and Mediated Online Solutions. And so you can refer to that in the materials that were provided to you, and that we have lots and lots of free resources on our respective websites. So the two company names and information are there for you. The website addresses are there. There are blog articles. There are helpful, short, informative videos. And there are more comprehensive, what we call resource guides, that are available for download from both websites. And we hope that you access those if you find that they might enlighten you on a particular topic. We also invite you to share those with friends or family, or share this information on how they can access all of the wonderful free information and resources we have on both websites. And with that, I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude for taking the time out to be with us and hear from us today. And I hope that wherever you are in your divorce journey, that you survive and thrive, and that you have someone in your corner who is giving you great advice and good support. So thank you, everybody. If you want to unmute everybody, Joshua or Carlene, if people want to say goodbye or share anything with the group before they go, that would be lovely. I'm not sure how to do that. Can I unmute everybody? I'm sure I can, but I don't know how.
Can't we unmute ourselves? Are you listening to me?
Oh, yeah. Hi, Jean.
Yes, hi.
You can.
This was great. Yes, you can unmute yourself if anybody's on.
All right. Awesome. I'm so excited to see you here.
Yes, me too. It's been a long time.
It has been a long time, but gosh, I will never forget my time in Puerto Rico on the heels of
Good.
Hurricane Maria.
You're welcome back.
Oh, we're looking forward to coming back sometime. But
Okay.
busy with 2 businesses.
Yes, I can imagine. And the governor couldn't come down because of the pandemic. Oh, she was so sorry about that. But I told her, you can come down anytime. It doesn't have to be for the convention or spring conference.
Yeah, there we go. Well, I do hope I guess you wouldn't be on here if you were going to the biennial conference in Hamburg.
No, I'm not going because I suffered a drastic accident January 3rd. That's why you're not seeing me. I posted a picture because I even have a neck collar and I'm under heavy treatment and I've gone through 2 operations. So I don't show myself. Everybody knows that by now.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. And I hope your recovery is going well, even though it sounds like it's taking a long time.
Thank you. Charlene says, there goes Jean with her actress picture.
No, it's a gorgeous picture.
Oh, vanity. Well, thank you so much, Debra, and the participants. Everything is quite similar to Puerto Rico, and I hope we can continue communicating in the future.
Yes, I would love that, Jean. Thank you very, very much. And I hope this was useful somehow for you professionally.
All right. God bless.
Okay, thank you.